Okay, today we have the Nikon Fa. This was by request, and I'm happy to provide a review based on a request. I happen to have an Fa here. This I picked up at a thrift store, and it came with a 50mm f1.4 lens with a filter. It says USA, it's a Vivitar filter on it, and good clean body, not a whole lot of marks on it. This was considered one of the most advanced bodies when it came out. This camera was a program camera, so it would set both shutter speed and aperture for you. It had shutter priority and aperture priority and full manual. It's kind of like the FE or the FE2, and it added a shutter priority mode and the program mode. It has the same controls as far as your ISO settings are over here, and then you can override them by +1 or -1 in automatic, which is basically essentially telling the camera to shoot at a different ISO. You turn it on by opening this lever. It uses a basic A76 battery, and it does take a winder, a motor drive. I believe it was the MD15 you used on the FA. The MD12 was the one I used a lot on an FM2 back when I was a newspaper photographer, and the MD15 was for the FA. But I never used one of these when I was working. I always used those mechanical cameras. But this one, they came up with an idea called matrix metering, and it was considered one of the best metering modes ever in a SLR. So this is considered a really excellent, technologically advanced film camera for in-camera metering, automatic modes. Using that program mode is actually very accurate. If we look at it, we can talk about, okay, so there are 4 modes on it. There's a P and S program, shutter priority, aperture priority, and manual. You notice the S and the P are both orange colored. That's because when you're using a AIS lens, they coded the apertures with colors, and the smallest aperture was orange. This camera, the smallest aperture is f/16, and so I would put it on that. But when you were using an AIS lens, you would actually put it on the orange setting, like the P and the S are orange, and it would automatically set both the aperture and the shutter speed in program mode, or it would set the aperture if you were in shutter priority. So the idea was you have to let the camera have access to the smallest setting by putting it on the smallest f-stop number, and then the camera could choose any aperture it wanted. But if you had it wide open, it had no ability to close it down. It could only have the ability inside to open it. Did I say that right? It would only have the ability to close it down. It wouldn't have the ability, I'll say that one more time. It would only have, if you put it on f/16, the ability to open that aperture, but if you had it on 1.4, it would not have the ability to close it down. So it effectively wouldn't have any of the apertures available that it might need to work in program and shutter mode. A very well-built camera. I like it a lot. I haven't used it a lot. It's one of those cameras that, you know, when you find it with a 51.4 clean lens, I check it like I do all cameras. I put it in manual mode, and I see if the shutter speeds sound like they might be somewhat close. A 1/25 should sound different than a 1/4, and it doesn't, and a 1/2. You know why? Because I just took film out of this, and when you're in those few notches before number 1 on the counter, it actually only shoots at a 60th or some fast shutter speed to help you get to number 1. Now that it's on number 1, I'm betting this will sound like a 1/2 second. There you go. And this is a 15th. And you can hear the distinction between that and the 250. And it's really clean. The mirror box is clean. I look at the back. It has the viewfinder. Some of these fall off. People take them off or they just fall off. And you don't need it. You can work without it. Sometimes you can negotiate down. I recently picked up a Nikon F2 that didn't have that, and I was able to negotiate it down because it didn't have it. Not that it makes any difference, but it's a negotiation point. So they use something called a honeycomb shutter. And you can see there's a little pattern on that shutter. And it was so that they could get a speed up to a 4,000th of a second. And everything looks good inside of the camera. There's nothing that looks like it's bent or has been, handled roughly with a finger poking through the shutter or anything. And the foam all looks good. This is a newer camera amongst SLR cameras compared to some of the older Pentaxes and some of the cameras that had a lot of, foam degradation. This one doesn't have that. And it does have a little burr right here. It looks like somebody had a strap or something and it was rubbing against it. So it's got a little defect right there, but again, that doesn't make any difference. It's just cosmetic. It's got a little lever here so that you can block off the viewfinder. You can see it turns red, then it opens up. So it's a way if you were using the camera on a tripod and you wanted to step away from the tripod but still shoot, you could block it from having any stray light going into the viewfinder and possibly fogging the film. It's got a depth of field preview button, so you can press this lever down and it effectually pushes this lever right here. And it lets you see through the lens at closed down aperture, if you can see that. It lets you see through. So, do I like the FA? I do. It's not a camera that I use professionally a lot, but I like the build quality. They're rather inexpensive now. They're technically very advanced in their metering system. Check it out and see if you like the feel of it. If you do, I don't think you can go wrong. As far as a camera goes, they're not as common as the FM2 and the FE2. I think you'll find a lot more of those than you will the FA, but this was considered a well-built camera. It was below the pro cameras of like the F3, but it's still very capable. And if you get one in this condition, it hasn't been used a lot. So it's not like it's all, worn out and been abused. So that's the Nikon FA. I like this camera a lot. One of these days I'll show you some cameras I don't like, but oops, I just hit the tripod. One of these days I'll show you some of the cameras I don't like, but this is one of those that I really do. Anyway, well, thanks for watching. I'll have more reviews. I hope this was helpful to the request I had, and hit the subscribe button and I'll send you some more videos soon. New cameras coming in all the time. Talk to you soon.